Fire up for big savings now at Charles Davis Ford, the big store.
Are you stuck in a job with no chance to advance? Call the National Education Center for a copy of this brochure.
Find out how you could train for a career in electronics in a lot less time than you think.
Find out about NEC's hands-on training, professional instructors, and flexible class schedules. Even keep your present job while you learn.
For a brochure on career training in electronics, call 1-800-722-7337. 1-800-722-7337. Call now.
The Guardian, keeping you safe on Channel 5.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. On the eve of a presidential visit to Latin America, we begin with a reminder of deep anti-U.S. feeling from Panama in Central America to Brazil in South America. Mr. Bush is going to stop in Panama tomorrow on his way to the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. There was anti-U.S. violence in Panama today, and an American serviceman has been killed as a result. Here's ABC's Bob Zelnick.
One American soldier was killed and a second injured when they came under fire driving along a highway. Their Army Humvee was attacked from a passing Toyota and tumbled down a hillside. The Toyota got away. Earlier this week at the Albrook Air Force Station outside Panama City, gunshots were fired at soldiers guarding the rear gate. No one was injured. A group known as M20, loyal to former strongman Manuel Noriega, claimed responsibility for that incident. Political demonstrations anticipating President Bush's visit have grown more intense. During a protest this morning in Panama City, some in the crowd set fire to a car occupied by U.S. servicemen. There were no injuries. Diplomatic sources say the demonstrators include Panamanians who lost homes during the 1989 U.S. invasion, people who claim the U.S. has never acknowledged thousands of civilian casualties, and students who see the president's visit as a threat to Panamanian sovereignty. Security at the Albrook Air Station where the president will speak has been beefed up, and officials here express confidence that Mr. Bush will be in no danger. Bob Zelnick, ABC News at the Pentagon.
After Panama, as we said, Mr. Bush flies on to Rio, where he will take what his spokesman calls an aggressive stance on U.S. environmental policy to the Earth Summit. ABC's Barry Sarafan reports from Rio that Mr. Bush should expect a less than enthusiastic welcome.
On the eve of his visit, President Bush was again the target of criticism by environmental activists who marched through Rio to the U.S. consulate, calling on the president to make stronger environmental commitments. These people are not likely to be encouraged by the word out of the White House today that the president intends to take an aggressive stance on the need to balance environmental protection and economic growth, with the emphasis on maintaining jobs. The president's position is reflected by U.S. efforts to hold down the costs of environmental aid to developing countries. The head of the summit is trying to keep the peace in the face of criticism of Mr. Bush.
I hope he will receive a warm welcome here. I think it is an important political commitment that he has made in agreeing to come here, knowing that some of the U.S. positions are very controversial.
Strong's call for respect for the president may help Mr. Bush at least receive a polite welcome, but it is not likely to make the U.S. stance on almost all issues here any more acceptable to most summit participants. Barry Sarafan, ABC News, Rio de Janeiro.
In Washington today, the political battle revolved around a proposed constitutional amendment that would force the Congress and the president to balance the federal budget. Our latest ABC News Washington Post poll finds an overwhelming majority of the public believes there should be such an amendment. So does President Bush. But there are many who argue that it's a substitute for making tough choices to deal with the federal deficit. Here's ABC's Cokie Roberts.
The deficit is a great evil that only a constitutional ban can wipe out. So said supporters of the amendment over and over today.
We've tried to balance the budget from inside the Beltway without the force and moral authority of a constitutional imperative to guide us. And as the farmer said when he asked for directions, you can't get there from here.
Opponents argued that Congress could balance the budget right now without any amendment if members were ready to make the spending cuts and raise the taxes to do it.
And if you're not willing to make those choices, there isn't a constitutional amendment in the world that's going to give you the guts to do it.
In any case, it could take years to pass and implement the amendment. During that time, the deficit could stay the same or even grow. Even so, the lobbyists, starting with the lobbyist-in-chief, are out in force.
I need your help to encourage your congressman to do the right thing. Pass this balanced budget amendment.
Backing the president are some anti-tax and pro-business groups that went door-to-door in the Capitol today.
We appreciate her support on this amendment.
Organized labor's working hard against the amendment. But lobbying campaigns in this election year have less effect on nervous House members than the voters back home. And with public opinion polls showing overwhelming support for the balanced budget amendment, that's the argument likely to make the difference. Cokie Roberts, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
In a moment, more politics. The vice president takes on what he calls the cultural elite. On the American agenda tonight, the dangers of loosening up the drug approval process. And finally from us, baseball. The game doesn't change no matter who owns the team.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Jeep.
Now, first-time buyers can get up to $900 in additional savings on new Jeep Wranglers.
Of all denture adhesives, only one holds the strongest, and it's just taken a turn for the better. Fixodent's new Easy Twist Cap. It's bigger, it's a snap to open, and it's one more reason to Fixodent and forget it.
It's a comfort to know more people have taken Sominex over the past 30 years than any other sleep aid. Safe, simple Sominex.
Vice President Quayle got some support from his boss today for his latest attack on what the vice president calls the cultural elite. Mr. Bush said he hadn't read all of Mr. Quayle's speech to the Southern Baptists yesterday, but he liked what he'd seen. In that speech, Mr. Quayle presented the 1992 political campaign as a fight between this supposed elite and those who he says support traditional values. As ABC's Jim Wooten reports, it's a message the nation has heard before.
The vice president's theme is that the country is divided between those who honor flag, family, and faith, people like him, and those who don't, much of the media, Hollywood producers, and college professors.
Talk about right and wrong, and they'll try to mock us in newsrooms, sitcom studios, and faculty lounges across America.
But the rest of America is applauding, he says, so he doesn't mind the criticism or the jokes.
I wear their scorn as a badge of honor.
None of this is new, of course. In 1969, another vice president also went after the media.
The views of a majority of this fraternity do not, and I repeat, not represent the views of America.
People forget that before the 69 speech on the media, Vice President Agnew was a, I may say, a laughed-at figure.
Victor Gold was Agnew's press secretary. He says what was politically good for that vice president is good for this one, too. But today in New York, Quayle dismissed the Agnew comparisons as exactly what he'd expected.
When you take on the powerful, when you take on the elite, when you take on the people that have money, when you take on the people that have influence, you're going to get ridiculed because they think that they are above everyone else.
The vice president's objectives are fairly simple. He means to rally the Republican right, reclaim those who are leaning toward Ross Perot, and refocus public attention from a faltering economy and government gridlock to the sins of the media elite. Jim Wooten, ABC News, Washington.
Beyond the political implications of Mr. Quayle's speech, is there merit to his charge of cultural elitism? ABC's Judy Muller has been asking some of the people who produce movies and television entertainment.
Dan Quayle's latest attack has raised hackles in Hollywood.
It's not only a bad rap, it's inaccurate and irrelevant.
Steve Sunshine is the producer of a new sitcom, Julie, which certainly presents old-fashioned values.
Put on a happy face.
Julie is languishing at the bottom of the ratings, while another rougher edge story about family values is at the top.
If you guys don't help out, we're not going to make it.
All right, Dad. We let you down and we're really sorry. Meeting adjourned.
It's true that Roseanne's family is a far cry from 50s families like Ozzie and Harriet, as are other family situations on TV.
This is great. We should be mothers.
But even if the TV family is not traditional, says producer Steve Sunshine, the moral messages do say something positive about American values.
90% of television, particularly half-hour television, is 22 minutes of morality play.
TV producers also say Quayle's criticism was selective, ignoring such programs as Cosby. Film producers take issue with Quayle's claim that they represent a cultural elite out of touch with America.
I think what we reflect is America, the diversity of America, that there are fathers of the bride scenarios in which everything proceeds according to some Norman Rockwell plan, and there are other Americas that most of us live in.
In other words, Hollywood producers see themselves not as a cultural elite, but rather as a cultural mirror, reflecting the popular taste of all Americans. Judy Muller, ABC News, Los Angeles.
The argument continues. 3 major health organizations called on the government today to start treating secondhand tobacco smoke as an environmental toxin. It's another way for the American Heart Association, the Lung Association, and the American Cancer Society to argue that smoking should be banned in all public places. And there were new questions today about the cancer-causing chemical dioxin. Over the years, the federal government has required industry to spend billions of dollars preventing dioxin's release into the environment and cleaning up what is already there. The question has come up again, just how dangerous is dioxin? Here's ABC's Bettina Gregory.
Almost 10 years ago, the residents of Times Beach, Missouri were forced to abandon their homes because oil on the roads was mixed with dioxin. Back then, dioxin was considered the most powerful cancer-causing agent made by man. But 2 years ago, a key federal official said dioxin wasn't dangerous enough to have turned Times Beach into a ghost town. Today, another reversal. A public health official said the evacuation was a prudent decision.
I think we would take the same action today.
Dioxin is unsafe at any dose.
Most dioxin is produced in making paper and paper products. It was a scientific review paid for by industry which suggested 2 years ago dioxin was at worst a weak carcinogen. This prompted a new review by the Environmental Protection Agency. And today, an EPA scientist denied low doses are safe.
That hypothesis is in fact not true.
Scientists testified dioxin may not only cause cancer, but nerve damage, birth defects, and harm the human immune system. So the review, sparked by industry which wanted dioxin regulations loosened, may result in tighter restrictions instead. Bettina Gregory, ABC News, Washington.
One note about money today, another day of profit-taking by investors drove stock prices down again on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost nearly 27 points to close at 33.43, and the trading was very active. In our next segment, dying of drought and politics.
It seemed like the rain would never stop. I mean, I could feel the dampness in my bones. For the first time since my doctor said I had a touch of arthritis.
He had some pain, so we called the doctor, and he recommended extra-strength Tylenol.
That's right.
With all the choices for your arthritis pain, well, I was surprised.
Well, the Tylenol worked. The pain cleared up.
A lot sooner than the weather.
Tylenol, arthritis pain relief from the name you trust.
Salsa Cycles wasn't saving what they'd hoped since leaving AT&T. Johnny Rockets was waiting longer for long-distance calls to connect, so they've come back to AT&T, and we want you back. Come back with AT&T Partners in Business. AT&T quality and 20% discounts to the 20 numbers you choose or the area code you call most. We want you back. Call 1-800-222-0400.
Never seen nothing like it. I mean, Rusty Slade was an ornery sort. Always ate his old Bran Flakes just for fiber. But one morning, I gave him Kellogg's new complete Bran Flakes. Weren't the same. More than fiber, they had whole grain wheat. Flakes were new too, crispy, crunchy. Why, that Kellogg's complete Bran Flakes even had a better nutty taste. It was all so good, made Rusty smile. Almost. New Kellogg's complete Bran Flakes. Fiber and then some.
Some of the overseas news, a convoy of United Nations peacekeeping troops was attacked today outside Sarajevo. One person was injured. A separate convoy left for Sarajevo this morning. The UN troops will try to convince Serbian militia leaders there to give up control of Sarajevo's airport so that food, medicine, and water can be brought in for the local population. We have a report tonight from what the United Nations calls the poorest nation on earth, the southern African nation of Mozambique. The whole region has been suffering the worst drought that anyone there can remember. One Mozambican farmer says when the foreign aid people come and look around, they don't understand why we're still alive. ABC's Mark Litkey is there.
In the parched villages of Gaza province, there have been no crops in over 2 years. No deliveries of emergency food aid in months. Villagers are barely surviving on the bitter roots and nuts they forage in the bush. They dig desperately for water in what remains of the Limpopo, once one of the great rivers of Africa. Now the Limpopo and the people who depend on it are dying.
I'm afraid we will be facing mass starvation within a short period of time.
Entire villages are on the move, in search of food and water. Severe malnutrition is taking a terrible toll. The haunting face of famine that came to symbolize Ethiopia a decade ago is an increasingly common sight in rural Mozambique. Yet it isn't nature alone that has brought these people to the brink of starvation. Mozambique has been ravaged by decades of civil war, lawlessness, mismanaged government, and massive corruption. These man-made calamities have left the country in chaos, severely hampering the distribution of aid by international relief agencies. Much of the food arriving in the capital, Maputo, never makes it to the interior. Many areas are simply too dangerous because they're controlled by anti-government rebels. Relief convoys have been repeatedly attacked, food stolen, trucks destroyed. Airlifts are equally hazardous. Pilots must often fly just above the treetops.
A high-flying object is much easier to hit than a low-flying object. We fly low-level for the security reasons.
Relief supplies have also been diverted by corrupt officials. Some ends up for sale in local markets. And recently, aid agencies threatened to stop deliveries altogether when the government began to levy taxes on humanitarian aid. Mozambique's president, responding to international criticism, told visiting Western journalists he would rescind the taxes and try to crack down on corruption.
We have to do some gesture to try and rescue the lives of the people.
But the lives of millions may already be beyond rescue. The countryside is being abandoned, the cities flooded with refugees, the fear of cholera and typhoid epidemics growing daily. The prospects for survival have never been worse in this poorest nation on earth. And still, no one can say when the rains will come. Mark Litkey, ABC News, Mozambique.
In a moment, the American agenda.
It's nothing serious. It only wakes me up a couple of times a week. It really doesn't affect me. I avoid foods that are fried or spicy. I can deal with it. I just take antacids.
If you have frequent heartburn symptoms like acid indigestion or burning in the chest, talk to your doctor. These may be signs of a serious medical problem. Your doctor has treatment plans that can help.
It's only a heartburn. I should learn to live with it. Right?
Frequent heartburn. Isn't it time you talk to your doctor?
You probably think the best American car value is some little econo box you have to settle for, right? Nope. It's a Buick. The luxurious Buick Park Avenue. That's according to the Complete Car Cost Guide. They calculated the 5-year cost of depreciation, financing, insurance, fuel, maintenance, and repairs, and found that Park Avenue is the best American car value. For a free reprint from the Complete Car Cost Guide, call 1-800-4-BUICK.
Ace Best Buys are easy to find. They're great values like these.
This Ace 60-foot garden hose is just $8.77, and this Stanley 25-foot power lock tape with free utility knife is just $9.99.
Ace Best Buys. Another reason Ace is the place for you.
Why are these people smiling? They've got new Polident for partials with the power to clean the pearly part and the metal part. And the best part, it only takes 5 minutes. So get new Polident for partials, unless you're already too good looking as it is.
Sold!
Let's say you bought a painting. Let's say
Then go sunflowers. Let's say you use the Discover card. You'd have a little money coming back. Because with the Discover card, every single charge earns an annual cashback bonus.
Nice.
It pays to Discover, the card that pays you back.
On the American agenda tonight, we're going to take a look at whether the Europeans have a better idea. This is about how easy or how difficult it should be for all of us to get our hands on the latest prescription drugs when we need them. If you go to a doctor in Europe with any one of many illnesses, there's a very good chance that you will have access to drugs which are not even legal in the United States. We've put the subject on the agenda because the Bush administration says it is now time for the Food and Drug Administration to loosen up. Here's our medical editor, Tim Johnson.
The complaint is familiar. AIDS patients protesting how long it takes to approve life-extending treatments. Asthma specialists charging that Europeans have approved drugs that provide better treatment than FDA-approved drugs. Family members of Alzheimer's disease patients attacking the FDA for not approving a drug that they believe relieves Alzheimer's symptoms.
We charge the FDA with lying to the public, saying that they will treat drug approval even-handedly and quickly.
In response, Dr. David Kessler, the new commissioner of the FDA, is moving to speed up the approval process, particularly for life-saving drugs. And in April, the Bush administration announced plans to ease FDA approval standards, including the acceptance of evaluations by scientists and researchers outside the agency and studies of safety done in Europe and Japan. These changes were proposed by Vice President Quayle's Council on Competitiveness. The Vice President predicts the FDA reforms will save money and lives. But critics disagree and point to countries without extensive drug regulation as reason for concern. So what can happen when a country makes it easier to get new drugs on the market? We went to Italy, where there is very little drug regulation. We found that a lot of drugs do get into the marketplace faster. The problem is they cost a lot of money, and many of them don't work. In Italy, where the Minister of Health approves drugs, there are twice as many new drugs released every year as in the U.S., and it is impossible to tell how many are truly effective. For example, in the U.S., there are no drugs approved for improving mental function in elderly people. But in Italy, there are lots of choices to treat so-called brain aging. But there is no good scientific evidence that any of them work.
We are in a situation where we have more than 100 drugs suggesting that they can work on brain aging, and we cannot distinguish which drug can have an effect and which is just a placebo.
Another example. This woman says she just bought medicines prescribed by a doctor to help her 14-year-old think better during a difficult school exam. Dr. Vincenzo Bacci, an internist in Rome, says he regularly prescribes drugs which do not work. He says as long as they don't make things worse, his patients are happy.
They usually have no side effects and no risks. And that is something that the Italian public probably like.
Professor Silvio Garrettini is director of one of Europe's most prominent drug research institutes. He says Italy is not only wasting money on drugs that don't work, but is putting patients in potential danger with worthless drugs.
The patient may receive an inactive drug when there may be an active drug for his particular disease.
And ironically, as the U.S. considers ways to loosen its drug regulation, there are now some in Italy who are looking to the FDA as the gold standard for drug regulation.
If I have to select a model, that is the model of the American FDA.
So as drug companies and politicians demand changes in how the FDA approves drugs, they might well look to countries like Italy as a reminder that the public can also lose when the drug regulators are not tough. For the American Agenda, I'm Dr. Timothy Johnson, ABC News.
When we come back, we'll talk about baseball.
four-star lighting wasn't saving what they'd hoped since leaving AT&T. Trefethen Vineyards was having trouble getting long-distance calls through on the first try, so they've come back to AT&T, and we want you back. Come back with AT&T Partners in Business, AT&T Quality, and 20% discounts to the 20 AT&T numbers you choose, or the area code you call most. We want you back. Call 1-800-222-0400.
Ordinary pickles are cooked and limp. Not Clausen. They're packed fresh and stored cold, so they're always crisp and delicious. Taste the difference. Cold, crisp, Clausen.
Your rugged routine, day after day. It's even harder when Athlete's Foot routinely comes back. Get prescription strength Lotrimin AF. It kills all causes of Athlete's Foot. Lotrimin AF, the finish line for Athlete's Foot.
There's more than new looks to the 93 Ford Escort. There's a whole new way to buy an Escort, because these 4 Escort LXs all share one low price, $10,499. The 3-door, 4-door sedan, 5-door, and wagon all have air conditioning, AM/FM stereo, power steering, power mirrors, and more. 4 Escorts, one price. Now buying an Escort's as easy as owning one.
Have you driven a Ford lately?
Tonight on Nightline, Sarajevo reduced to rubble. Thousands dead, 1 million refugees. A call for U.S. military intervention. Tonight.
Finally from us this evening, catching up with the times in baseball. It took months and months for Major League Baseball to finally decide that the Japanese could buy a piece of the Seattle Mariners. Now we figure, what's the big deal? ABC's Brian Rooney reports tonight on a whole lot of people who think that baseball, is baseball, no matter who owns it, no matter who plays it.
Skirt card, lucky number.
$1.
To honor America, we invite you to rise for the playing of our national anthem.
It's a Wednesday night, and the Visalia Oaks take the field against the Salinas Spurs. It's the lowest of the minor leagues, single-A small-town baseball, farm teams for the big leagues. It's very American, except that both teams are owned by Japanese companies.
Number 24, third baseman, Tokashi Yuchinokura.
Salinas has a half-dozen Japanese players who probably wouldn't be here if the owner was not Japanese. On the field, they're nothing special. In the clubhouse, you can see they pull their socks up one at a time. Among the Americans, there's little objection to Japanese players or ownership.
As far as I'm concerned, you couldn't tell this was owned by a Japanese team because our GM's American and our coaches are American, but...
Game doesn't change?
No, the game doesn't change at all.
Makes too much difference to me as long as I'm getting paid, man. I don't care.
Baseball is, after all, a business, and business is an international league. Like just about everything else in America, it's been a long time since the game of baseball has been entirely American. After all, this baseball is made in Costa Rica. And the fans don't care about that either.
Well, I drive a Nissan, so what more can I say?
American sport right here.
Now let's get it over now.
Couldn't ask for anything better. It doesn't matter if the Japanese own them.
This night, Visalia beat Salinas 15-9. A Japanese-owned team won, a Japanese-owned team lost. And it was still baseball the way Americans love it. Brian Rooney, ABC News, Visalia, California.
That's our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source. Wednesday.
I'm going to do something with you tonight that I've never done before in my life.
It's outrageous.
I mean, 1 minute we're kissing and the next there's a woman coming out of your bedroom in her underwear. Oh, look, a new face.
Civil Wars. Wednesday.
What kind of bed do kids want?
Bunk bed! A water bed! A princess canopy bed! A day bed!
You'll find all those and more at the grand opening of Kids Beds. Kids Beds has the lowest prices on beds for every kid. Bunk beds start at just $99.99.
Cool!
Choose from a great selection of day beds as low as $45.99.
Incredible!
It's the grand opening of
Kids Beds!
Kids Beds, Merle Hay Road at Douglas next to Big Sur Waterbeds.
Tonight at 5 and 10, watch Channel 5 News for Murphy's Law, brought to you by Bonanza, where the extras don't cost extra.